Did you know that our hearts beat around 100,000 times each day? That equals a lot of blood being pumped in and around our bodies. Welcome back. Today our lesson will be about the human heart. Let's get started. So first of all, we'll be going through each important part of the heart and its function. As we go through this diagram, I'll also be drawing arrows and explaining the flow of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood from the circulatory system and how that plays a role in our heart. So just in case if you didn't know, oxygenated blood, which we will be denoting with a red arrow, is high in oxygen content. And this is very important for our muscles because our muscles use this oxygen content in order to complete a process called cellular respiration, which creates a lot of energy in our bodies that we can use to move. So, in order for our muscles to properly function, they need oxygenated blood. But on the other hand, we have deoxygenated blood, which we will be denoting with a blue arrow, implying that this blood has almost depleted oxygen content, so 0 to none oxygen content in this type of blood. Essentially, these two blood types are the same because after we have our oxygenated blood delivered to the legs, to the muscles, to the arms, it is depleted of its oxygen, which makes it into deoxygenated blood. The only difference is the oxygen content, but there's nothing actually very, very different in these types of blood. It's just the oxygen content is depleted. So remember that as we go through this video and describe the blood flow as well. So let's get started. First up, we have the aorta. So I'm going to write this down on number 1. The aorta. And the aorta is this funny looking crown sort of thing, but it's actually an artery that carries blood away from the heart and towards the different parts of your bodies. So the blood that actually goes out of the aorta is very, very rich in oxygenated blood, which then gets delivered to things like your arms, legs, muscles, and brain. So now we're going to label the blood flow. We have oxygenated blood, so blood that's rich in oxygen coming from down here, and then it's going to get distributed out of the aorta and go to things like your arms, legs, muscles, and your brain so that those muscles can properly function. Second, we have the superior vena cava. I'm also going to write that down on number 2. Superior vena cava. Now, the superior vena cava is this tube-looking thing, and it's a vein that brings deoxygenated blood to your heart in order for the blood to be able to reoxygenate. Think of your body's system of the circulatory system like that of recycling. Just like our body replenishes oxygen in the blood that's been used, recyclable materials are made from other paper and plastic that's been used before. So the superior vena cava is actually very, very useful in replenishing blood. Now, I said that it brings in deoxygenated blood, so we're going to have a long blue arrow stretching from all the way up here because we know that the blood is coming from our body after being used to down here, right into the heart. And we'll get into these sections later, but right now what's important is that we have a bunch of deoxygenated blood coming down from our bodies and into the heart from the superior vena cava. Third, we have the right pulmonary artery. So I'll write that down. Right pulmonary artery. This artery carries deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs so that the blood can pick up some oxygen. So basically, the deoxygenated blood comes from all around your body to the heart, and then from there, the blood goes straight to the lungs in order to pick up some oxygen, so that the replenished blood can be delivered to your body again. So Remember how I said this takes the deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs? We're going to take our deoxygenated blood and draw an arrow out because our lungs are going to be somewhere over here. So we're going to draw an arrow out because the deoxygenated blood is going to the lungs in order to get oxygenated. And then, fourth, we have our right pulmonary veins. So right pulmonary veins. This is the next step from where we left off. After the blood is replenished with the oxygen from the lungs, it comes back through these veins so it can enter the heart again. So pretend we have our lungs here. So the blood that is deoxygenated comes all the way over here, it becomes replenished with the oxygen, and it comes back here where we will get oxygenated blood. So from here, we're going to get a lot of oxygenated blood into the heart from these two arteries, from these two veins, sorry. And then it will continue from the other side when we pick up on number 10. But right now, let's go to number 5. So fifth, we have the right atrium. So number 5 is our right atrium. The right atrium is one of the 4 important chambers of the heart. For this one, we have to backtrack a little bit. So the right atrium, which is this gigantic space right here, receives a bunch of deoxygenated blood from the superior vena cava. Remember this tube. And then if you think of it this way, the right side of the heart, so this side of the heart, will be dealing with the task of replenishing deoxygenated blood, which leads to number 6. So we still have our blue arrow here because we know that our deoxygenated blood is still coming in from the superior vena cava. But number 6 is a special one. Number 6 is the tricuspid valve. So I'll write it right here. Tricuspid valve. So if you didn't know, a valve, it just looks like this, and it really helps in maintaining the flow of blood. So when these valves open, then the blood can flow through. But if these valves close, so they fold back here, so both of them will be connected like this, if these valves close, then the blood cannot flow through. So the valves are very, very important in making sure that the blood does not flow backwards, or in other words, that the blood is only flowing in one direction. And here's a fun fact. The beating sound that your heart makes is actually the different valves opening and closing. So keep in mind that we still have deoxygenated blood flowing in from the superior vena cava, going all the way down here. Which brings us to number 7. Seventh, we have the right ventricle. Right ventricle. The right ventricle is another chamber of the heart. This is the second to last step in delivering deoxygenated blood to the lungs. So we're looking at this chamber right here. This chamber is responsible for pumping deoxygenated blood to the arteries, which will then deliver the deoxygenated blood to the lungs in order for reoxygenation. So basically, this is the second chamber of the heart that we're going to be looking at. And remember that we still have our deoxygenated blood flowing in from here. And then it's going to make a loop around when we go up here. Okay, so next, our 8th part, we have the inferior vena cava. So I'm going to write that down right here. Inferior vena cava. Okay, So just like the superior vena cava, this vein that we're looking at right here, this vein brings deoxygenated blood to our heart so that the blood can be replenished. The only difference between the superior and inferior is that the inferior brings deoxygenated blood from the lower part of your body, like the legs, abdomen, and so on. So we're going to draw another blue arrow because it's bringing in deoxygenated blood from down here. And then it's joining in the bloodstream that's coming from up here. So eventually they both join in. Okay, we are officially halfway through all the parts. Let's keep going. Next up, number 9. We have the left pulmonary artery. So left pulmonary artery. This is the final artery that is involved in bringing deoxygenated blood to the lungs. The left pulmonary artery receives the deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle and then proceeds to deliver the blood to the lungs for replenishment. So, just like I said, it receives the blood from down here, and then we go all the way up here for the blood to be delivered to the lungs. So we have another lung on this side. Now this blood is going to continue to the lungs like this, and then it's going to get reoxygenated with all the oxygen that's present in the lungs right here. And then it'll eventually come back to the heart. Okay, let's move on to number 10. These are going to be the left pulmonary veins. Left pulmonary veins. From here on out, we'll begin the process of taking in replenished and oxygenated blood. So remember, the left side of the heart is responsible for receiving oxygenated blood. So this is our left side of the heart. So the left side of our heart is responsible for receiving oxygenated blood from the lungs and then pumping it to the rest of the body. So the left pulmonary veins along with the right pulmonary veins are the first things to receive oxygenated blood from our lungs. So the left pulmonary veins and the right pulmonary veins are going to be delivering this fresh, new oxygenated blood into the left side of our heart. So I'm just going to draw the flow of blood again. We come back from our lungs all the way inside these wonderful veins that will deliver some fresh oxygenated blood to our heart. Okay, then we have the left atrium, number 11. Let's label this left atrium. Okay, the left atrium is the third out of the 4 important chambers of the heart. We're talking about this upper chamber right here. So this chamber receives oxygenated blood from the left and right pulmonary veins, after which it continues to pump this blood throughout the heart. So let's draw our flow of blood. So we obviously have a lot more oxygenated blood. We're bringing in tons of good fresh blood here, and we're pumping it all the way down here into the next part, which is number 12. Number 12 is going to be the mitral valve. Mitral valve. Similar to the tricuspid valve we have over here, the mitral valve prevents blood from flowing in the wrong direction, and it actually separates the 2 chambers on the left side of the heart, similar to the right side of the heart. So remember what I said, if these valves close, if this valve closes, it's going to seal off the blood flow, making sure that the blood cannot flow backwards into the previous chamber of the heart, which would be actually pretty bad for you because you don't want that to happen. You want the blood to keep flowing in one direction. Okay, number 13 is going to be another valve that we're going to discuss. This is going to be the aortic valve. So aortic valve. Now, if you can figure out why it's called aortic valve right now, I just want you to pause the video, Think about it, and then you can play this when you think you've gotten it. So the aortic valve is actually just adjacent to the mitral valve, and it also prevents backward blood flow. It also delivers blood to the aorta, which is going to be up here. So think of it this way. We have our blood going from here, and then it's going to go behind this portion, but you just can't see it because it's going behind. And then it's going to be delivered to the aorta in order for this blood to go through our different muscle groups. Okay, so now that we have this blood flow, we can move on to number 14, which is going to be the left ventricle. So let's write this down. Left ventricle. Okay, this is going to be the final chamber of the heart that we're going to talk about because it is the fourth chamber of the heart. This chamber contains oxygenated blood and is surrounded by all of this muscle. So this shaded in portion is actually all muscle of the heart. And it's surrounded by all this muscle because it has to be strong enough to pump the blood to our entire body. So the left side of our heart actually has a really big responsibility. This chamber receives its blood from the left atrium, which is this chamber right here, and delivers it to the aorta, which is up here, and the aorta to our lower body, which is this one right here. And then that brings us to number 15. Number 15, we're just going to call it aorta to lower body. Remember that the aorta is an artery, so it will be pumping blood away from the heart. This aorta receives blood directly from the left ventricle. So our blood is not only going to flow upwards in this direction, but it's also going to come down here and into this artery so that it can be delivered to the lower part of our body too. So this aorta receives blood directly from the left ventricle. And that finishes up all of our numbers. I just wanted to discuss one more thing. And this is actually very, very important, so I'm going to use a different color. If you know what this part of the heart that I'm shading in is called, you can pause, write it down in the comments, and send it to me via an email. But this part of your heart is called the septum. So purple, I'll make it septum. This can also be called ventricular septum, but this is the thick muscle that separates the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Sometimes people are actually born with holes in their septum, which could dangerously affect their health, in which case they must be treated. But this is basically a really, really thick muscle that separates the other halves of the heart. And this is super important because we don't want our oxygenated and deoxygenated blood to be mixed, because then when our supposedly oxygenated blood goes to our muscles, then it'll actually be very, very low in oxygen content, in which case your heart will have to pump faster and faster and faster for your muscles to receive sufficient oxygen content. So that sums up the lesson on today's human heart anatomy. Today we just went over all 15 parts, well technically 16 if you include septum, all 16 parts of the human heart. We went over the blood flow, the anatomy, and we also discussed the definitions of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Please share this video with anybody who you think it might benefit, or anybody who is just interested in learning about this sort of stuff. You can comment down below if you have any questions or any answers to the questions that I asked in this video. You can even comment down below some video suggestions or some topics that you guys might have trouble with. In any case, please like this video and subscribe, turn on the notifications bell, and email exceledlearning if you have any questions or comments or suggestions. Thank you. I'll see you next time. Bye.